Good afternoon. Welcome to Fast Forward. I'm Gavin Esty, a technical director from Appnovation. Appnovation is a full-service digital consultancy specialized in the design, development, and support of engaging user experiences. We're a Contentful Gold partner and a Fast Forward Platinum sponsor, and we'd like to thank Contentful for having us here today. Today, I'm going to talk about content in the enterprise and what that might mean. Enterprise solutions have traditionally involved fitting a big piece into a big hole. I spent a big piece of my career working on deploying and maintaining big suites of complicated, expensive software, often going back to clients 4 or 5 years later and repeating the process again. How do we escape from this trap of enterprise being big solutions to big problems? What if instead we could plug that hole with a solution built from smaller pieces? Today, I'm going to talk about how we might make that happen. We want to move from picking single vendor suites to modular stacks, thoughtfully picking best of breed components and integrating them to make a one-size-fits-you platform that's you. That's what this is really about, building solutions that is your solutions that you own, that meets your needs and doesn't tie you to the roadmap of your vendor, it ties you to your roadmap. What we need is this inversion of control, putting control back in the hands of developers, authors, platform owners, making it our own decisions, being able to choose programming languages or multiple programming languages that fits our needs, avoiding big upfront costs for both licensing and development, avoiding this big bang, all or nothing approach that brings us lots of risk, both initially and for upgrades. How many big platforms have problems upgrading to the next one? How many times has something been end of lifed and you have to scramble to try and figure out what the solution is going to be? These are not solving business problems. You're solving someone else's technical problems. And finally, we want to deploy in cloud approaches that make scaling and maintenance someone else's problems. We don't want to be in the maintenance business. We want to be in the content business. And we want to use cloud in ways where we're not just spinning up containers and pretending that we're just moving those containers to the cloud like we did 10, 15 years ago. And how I think about this inversion of control is the difference between tightly coupled components and loosely coupled components. Tightly coupled components are built to fit a singular purpose. They are dependent on each other and inhibit reuse. They make things hard that shouldn't need to be hard. On the other hand, loosely coupled components are independent and reusable, increasing the platform's overall extensibility. We want to avoid the inertia, this tendency to resist change that's brought on by complex interconnection, and instead strive for the ability to react faster. It's less about big A agile and more about being agile, embracing change, and figuring out how you can keep embracing change. How many companies struggle to react to the changes brought by COVID-19 in 2020 due to either system or organizational inertia? If you look at your architectural diagram, it's about the arrows being more important than the boxes. Data flow between components over components themselves. Being able to swap out those components that aren't working for you. As things change, you want to be able to have your platform change with you. We want to think about design, content, and tech in the same way. We want to build great things from simple ingredients. We want to put content front and center and use design and tech to support that content. But before we look at the future, let's look at how we got here. Let's look back a few years on some key things that needed to happen to get us on this journey. Things like atomic design, headless CMSs, such as Contentful, cloud changes, functions as a service, JAMstack. We have some powerful and fun building blocks for our journey. When we look at atomic design, it's about reimagining the way we design pages. Instead of thinking about designing pages from a page-centric universe, we want to build pages from the ground up. We want to design systems of components that fit together and provide coherent, consistent design systems across the enterprise. And we want to escape this page-centric world that came from the print kind of history of web. Like Web came from print. Print has this page-centric design. In the same way that pages were created, we would wireframe pages and work backwards on the details. And by doing that, we'd end up with things like 5 carousel components and dozens of buttons that all look different. Atomic design really borrows from chemistry and uses those ideas about bottom-up thinking. We can compose individual atoms, maybe a title atom and an image atom, into a product molecule, and then combine that into a product grid organism. We can make a product landing page template, and then finally take that template, build a concrete women's sweater page out of it. And then once we've looked at modeling these organisms, we can then build content models around the support of those organisms and start creating content. One of the tools we find invaluable at Appnovation is Storybook. It's an essential tool for this process. It enables your developers to build components outside of an application. You can do this without having a dev stack or a test database, or having to navigate around and worry about corner cases. It's especially important for the workflow of the project I'm going to talk about in more detail later, because they have a dozen themes. So testing each variation of a component is a huge amount of work. You'd have to find a dozen test sites that use a component, one for each theme. You'd have to find the page that has the component configured on it. And then you'd have to test each of those pages. Or you can look in Storybook and you can change the theme from a dropdown and figure out how those different design systems interact. The next part of the journey, Headless CMS, the decoupling of the content store from the front-end rendering, Contentful. We want to remove the presentation layer and focus on content creation and orchestration. We want to use content across channels and devices. And it's really this idea of more than just web pages. It's a multitude of channels these days that we need to get content to. And again, using cloud for infinite scaling, figuring out how we can best use cloud technologies to help us in our scaling goals. Then functions as a service, this journey into serverless computer, breaking down complex applications from monoliths into smaller components, figuring out how to build APIs from these modular components, and having APIs that we can plug together, that we can integrate together to then build systems from, relying on cloud from infinite scaling. And this is really a moving away from the old way of looking at replicating physical machines into the cloud hosting with containers, and instead using the new functionality that cloud providers are creating, building cloud first, cloud native applications that architect in this cloud functionality from day one. It's more than just containers in the cloud. And one of these ideas around this that's really coalesced into JAMstack, this JavaScript APIs and markup. How do we take JavaScript's partially static pages, these APIs that we're creating, and simple markup, and combine them in new innovative ways to quickly develop fast applications and really try and achieve this rapid development that has been the goal of development since the creation. So rapid development, iterating quickly, iterating locally, avoiding hard to reproduce dependencies, using innovative and inexpensive cloud hosting options. You're able to deploy applications to platforms like Netlify or even Amazon S3 buckets and really drive down your individual hosting costs as much as possible. And more importantly, not having to figure out what those scaling needs are ahead of time. This cloud for infinite scaling idea. And it's really these two themes that I've been talking about. How do we break down complex things into simpler components and then recombine them in innovative ways? How do you push scaling problems to the edge and move from this pay up front to a pay-as-you-go model to really stop these large investments in big platforms and instead make investments in small, nimble, agile platforms instead? Adrian Cockcroft, one of the cloud architects at Netflix, that kind of pioneered a lot of the microservices-based approach that we talk about today. And there always used to be these discussions at Netflix, like people would say, you're spending $10 million a month on AWS. Why not just spend $100 million and build your own data center and avoid this? And Netflix would always counter that they would rather spend the money on content. And we think the same way. We think that content is king. You want to be in the content business. You don't want to be in the hosting and infrastructure business. Make that someone else's problem. Make that someone else's job to maintain those systems for you. And then bring your own tech stack, to bring your own platform to someone else's infrastructure. This is the kind of the idea here. Bring a simple, powerful tech stack. Things like server-side generation, Gatsby, Next.js. Couple that together with JavaScript rendering logic, React. It seems like React is taking over the world these days. Add in things like Contentful for your content hub, Algolia for search, use cloud hosting and delivery. And I can't repeat this enough times, but things like Netlify is great if you're using Gatsby and Contentful. You get preview, you get fast incremental builds, and the ability for your editors to trigger Netlify builds right inside of Contentful. It's a single system where you can make all of those changes. Then on top of this, you can bring your favorite A/B testing tool. We quite like Atomization. You can bring your analytics, such as Google Analytics and DevOps, e.g. GitLab, GitHub, whatever your teams like to use. And then your platform becomes the glue. And then you set the direction of your platform, not the vendor. You figure out what your roadmap looks like and where you're going to derive the value from. You're not just following along someone else's roadmap and letting them make the decisions for you. One example I'd like to bring up here is National Veterinary Association, NVA. They have over 1,000 vets, specialty ER, equine, and pet resorts. About a year or so ago, Appnovation took over support, maintenance, and ongoing development for NVA's almost complete platform. And since then, we've launched over 500 sites on the platform. And we've launched it using this stack: Gatsby, Contentful, Azure, Cloudflare, Google Analytics, and Azure DevOps. Static sites are hosted on Azure storage accounts, which, if you're not familiar with Azure, is very similar to AWS S3 buckets. Cloudflare provides SSL, CDN, and rewrite roles. They provide that content delivery that makes things happen. And this stack has really allowed NVA to scale, currently powering 526 sites today for their community and growing. When we think about the maintenance or support of systems, we think about the 60-60 rule. It's a simple rule. 60% of the lifecycle cost of software comes from maintenance, with only 40% spent on the original development. Of that 60%, 60% is spent on average on user-generated enhancements, i.e. changing requirements. So when we think about this, it means you're spending the majority of the money on a system on change. The bulk of your expenditure is accounting for change. Appnovation helps clients such as NVA over the long term manage this change while trying to squeeze the most value out of their investment in technology. One of the ways we go about that is trying to design systems that are easy to change. And it doesn't mean designing in flexibility at a low level. Most of the time, that is the wrong way to do things. Duplicating simple components is a lot better than being locked into the wrong abstraction. What we want to do instead is looking at changeability at the macro level. How do we add and reduce components to enhance the system? How do we introduce new data stores or systems? Can we pull out the existing search and replace it with a better search? Can we take analytics and data and add new analytics and data providers? Do we have integration tools and patterns to support data flow? And looking at the reason we do this is user experience. We want to build a great user experience. A great user experience is a differentiator. In fact, we think that UX is the top brand differentiator in 2020. It drives user retention, it drives engagement, it drives conversion. But what lies behind the curtain that powers great user experiences? And we think about things from a front stage and backstage perspective. And just as the audience watching a play experience the front stage and don't get to really glimpse behind the curtain at all the hard work that has to happen to make that play happen on the front stage, the user experience is driven by activities that happen in the backstage. Any improvements we can make to tools, systems, processes in the backstage will drive a better user experience. One impacts the other. And improving the development experience is about empowering engineering teams to deliver great products at speed without fear of change. And that fear of change is important. I'm sure many of us have worked on systems that feel like a big ball of mud where every change has the risk that like you'll bring the whole system down. You're going to be the one that is blamed for that small innocuous change that takes things down on the weekend. Nobody wants to spend their evenings doing deploys, overnight deploys, firefighting problems. And how do we solve this problem is introducing modern development practices such as DevOps, continuous delivery, automated testing, and so on to drive efficiencies and drive this feeling of safety. And really, we know that driving these things and improving them delivers great user experiences. Great user experiences are built by empowered development teams. And it's not just about developers too, it's about improving the authoring experience. Often in the development of a system, that's the thing that's thought of right at the end. The login for the CMS is provided to the authoring team, and it's like, go ahead, work your magic, everything's going to be great. But how do we support those authors in really great workflows, making sure that the systems meet their need, making sure that they really understand how things fit together? It's all an integrated system. One thing impacts another. Great authoring experiences lead to great user experiences. And our thinking around this is simple. It's very agile. You want to build something that's good today, and you want to make it better tomorrow. And how do we make it better? We have to figure out what data we can use to understand how to make things better, what better really means. And we want to expand the front stage thinking, the same tools, processes, and so on to the backstage. The same thing we do to drive great user experiences, we want to use to deliver great developer and authoring experiences too. I always laugh when I see this, but the llama from Napoleon Dynamite's a fantastic movie in 2004, brought us the idea of vote for bread tray, but it also brought us Tina the llama. And now we have the fantastic Tina CMS, which is starting to gain a cult following at Appnovation. And how we look at this is we have a traditional model, which is what used to be about building a website on top of a CMS. Then the headless model came where the content is independent of the website. The site loads content and creates pages from it. And now we really have the Tina paradigm. Your website is the CMS. Use Tina to build editing capabilities directly into your website experience. And Tina brings you a set of tools. It gives you real-time editing for React-based sites, and it gives you a toolkit for building authoring experiences that are relevant to you. It's a framework for doing things and for making sites. And it helps you decouple the editing of content from where that content is stored. You can have multiple content stores and make a consistent editing experience across them. And that's what we've done at MVA with Easy Editor. We've built an editing experience for their 4,000 plus clinic managers so that they're able to go in and make simple changes without having to engage the web team. One example of this is being able to go in and edit the hours for their particular VATs. It's very simple. We've built custom controls to allow complex data to be easily edited. There's a live preview showing how the data would look on the actual site. And we've made basic editing operations self-serve so that the web team can focus elsewhere. The web team can focus on more valuable things than going in and changing the hours of operations for a vet. They're able to drive the business forward. And one of the ways we look at this developing internal applications is the same way we develop external applications. We conduct user testing on these systems where we want to answer a set of questions. Who is our user? Do our design work? And what features are important for the future? And we use this methodology, rapid iterative testing and evaluation. And it's really about how can we get feedback as fast as possible? How can we make the design process iterative? We don't want to test a bad design on a whole cohort of users. We want to iterate it as soon as we get some feedback. As soon as we start getting some ideas, we want to make fixes in tools like Inversion to mock up user experiences and get feedback on those changes so that we have feedback on design changes before it even goes into development. So we've talked about all of these great tools, all of these great things. What's next? What do you do once you've built your great new shiny system? And it's really about then how do you drive the most value from it? This focus on content distribution, leveraging your CMS to be a content hub, not a content repository, trying to break free from this tightly coupled content delivery and figure out new ways to use that content and new channels to use that content on. And going back to the why is things like inbound marketing, the idea of creating and distributing relevant content so that potential customers find you. It's about the need to distribute content to where it will reach customers on their terms, not on your terms. And one of the tools we at Appno use to do this is this idea around content atomization, the right content to the right visitor on the right channel at the right time. We do this by breaking down content into individual chunks and then reusing those chunks in strategic ways. Instead of a 5,000 word blog post that just lives on your website, you can take that content, make lists out of it, make Twitter posts out of it, make short YouTube videos out of it, add that content to your Google My Business, to your Facebook. Really see how you can use each piece of content you can create in the most strategic way possible, and really shift from content management to content distribution. And then tie this to Martech, because really when it comes to marketing technologies and marketing in general, content drives every step of that journey. Marketers need to be agile marketers. It's really the third leg of the stool in the backstage. There's developers, authors, and marketers. And these systems need to be connected and not silos, because integrated systems drive integrated marketing. It drives things forward. Again, prevent silos, build integrations. Integrating Contentful with your various marketing tools prevents these content silos. One of our integrations we really like doing is tying Contentful to Salesforce Marketing Cloud so that the same tool you build web pages in is used to power your email templates too. Gives Salesforce Marketing Cloud access to all of your team's content creation efforts, all of your product data, your web content, your mobile content, and so on, so that your marketing team can build the most persuasive, personalized campaigns possible. And in closing, wrapping these ideas up, like, what do we do? Like, what are the key guiding points to this? It's really trying to figure out how to get the initial version of things live in 60 to 90 days, moving from year-long projects to short projects instead, using data to figure out where to go next, avoiding these silos, using Martech to understand customers and find new customers, embracing lean enterprise, don't choose big enterprise. Thank you. We're looking forward to building something amazing together.